Hey guys, kinggath here with another patch for Sim Settlements 2. This is patch 2.3.0, which I'm calling the Chapter 2 Rebalance. Now that's a bit of an over-exaggerated title because we didn't do a ton to rebalance the mod from a mechanical perspective, but we did change the default settings and we added some new settings to give players a smoother experience with some of the mechanics that were added with Chapter 2, particularly the disease system and HQ. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Of course, we always got to start out by thanking our patrons because they make this so much more fun by helping to ensure we don't have to dig into our wallets to cover the expenses of building the mod and maintaining the community sites and everything. So I'm going to give a shout out to a handful of you, and if I don't get to you today, it means that you came in after I already jotted down the most recent names. So huge shout out and thanks to the Jensens, Oscar Fry. There's no way I'm getting this last name right, so I'm going to upgrade you to Sir Patrick Galati. Hopefully the Sir makes up for it. QB, Corporal Keck, Blair Kriz, Intricate Mayhem, and Kevin Young. Thank you guys for contributing to the project. You're amazing. And a shout out also to those of you who have contributed in other ways. I know periodically people send me donations in other forms, and you guys are awesome as well. Thank you so much. It all helps. It all helps a lot to make sure that I don't anger the family budget by tipping into there to cover the costs of making this. All right, guys, let's get into the patch notes. So first thing I will say is be sure to grab the Workshop Framework update. There's almost always one corresponding with SS2 updates. And next, there is a Rise of the Commonwealth for SS2 update, a rare update to that. I will address one thing that a lot of people have asked me to fix various bugs in ROTC, and there is a technical thing that prevents us from doing it very rapidly, and so it is kind of sat on the sidelines. So what we address today with ROTC is one thing only, and that is the fact that many of the levels of the different city plans in ROTC will expect you to have way more settlers living at them than they can actually support at their levels. This was a glitch based on our web tool when we designed it. If you've never done a city plan yet, you may not know that we have this web tool that actually generates city plan plugins. And when we had generated that for ROTC, there was a bug. It caused all of our numbers to be way out of whack, and it has since been resolved, so we fixed those numbers. So you should find now that most of the city plans should require a more reasonable number of settlers at the earlier levels, making it easier for those ROTC city plans to more naturally upgrade without you having to manually send a bunch of extra settlers to them. Now, some of the other bugs in ROTC that are commonly reported are things like duplicate items, and we are aware of that issue in some of them. It's not all of the plans, there's just a handful of them that have this issue, and we will be addressing those in a future patch, but know for now that there's a technical limitation preventing us from doing that easily, and so it takes many hours to fix either of those, so it's kind of been gone by the wayside, but we haven't given up on it. So if you were waiting for a fix on those particular things, those haven't been addressed. We simply addressed the issue with the settler requirements for upgrades. Okay, so now let's get into why this patch is called what it is and why it went to 2.3.0 instead of 2.2.6. So first up, the reason it's at a 2.3.0 is because we changed some major code under the hood. So while we've tested a lot with existing saves, it's just, I like to go update that second number when it's a risky update. So you might want to back up your save before here and check it out. We've tested it a lot. We put it out for public beta, but just know that we've changed some of the under the hood code pretty significantly, particularly to do with production from your plots. And so I want to update that second number as a kind of a hey, pay attention, this is a big update from that perspective, but also because anybody starting new on this patch should expect a bit of a different experience for the two new systems added with Chapter 2, and this is where that Chapter 2 rebalance for the patch name comes into play. So what we've done for this is kind of a band-aid fix for some of a perceived balance issue with some of the new mechanics, and that in particular, that's the disease mechanic and HQ. So basically with both of them, they come with a fairly steep requirements as far as learning and I don't want to say micromanagement, but of understanding and interacting with new gameplay elements. Basically, for the average player, we've added too much depth, and so we need to pull it back a little bit on our default settings so that people who are new to it don't get overwhelmed so easily with these new mechanics. Now, for hardcore players, we basically left the options alone. So if you started your game on survival or selected hardcore from the options wizard that comes up when you boot up the city planner or the city manager holotape for the first time, none of these things will change for you. All of our changes are strictly for people who are playing on the automated or city builder profiles, which, if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, whenever you load up a new game with SS2 installed, it looks at the difficulty you selected. So we consider easy and very easy to be automated, normal up to very hard are considered city builder, and then survival is considered hardcore. And that determines the default settings that SS2 uses and which mechanics it enables and disables. So most of you are probably playing on the city builder difficulty. I would guess the second most of you are on the hardcore settings, and then the least of you are probably on automated based on it, because I'm guessing very few of you actually start easy games anymore. So with all that said, let's get into some of the particular settings that change, just so you're aware. If you start a new game, you can expect this new gameplay. And I'm also going to talk about it from a high level of what the goal is, because some of these settings, if I just read them off, it's gonna confuse the hell out of everybody, even people who are old hands, because they probably don't have these setting names memorized. So I'm going to probably talk about it at a higher level, and then you guys can see in the patch notes the specifics. So the first thing we'll talk about is the disease system. So after a lot of feedback meetings and discussion with people, reading through posts on the forums and things, the number one issue folks seem to have with the disease system is the potential for it to cause a cataclysmic failure where your networks start getting knocked out. And the incapacitation, the way it works is if your settlers receive enough diseases of certain sickness rating, then that exceed their endurance, they basically go into what we call incapacitation, which means that they just sleep all the time. They will go to the nearest hospital, they will lay in their bed, or sometimes they'll just curl up on the ground in the fetal position. And when this happens, any plots they were using get set to non-operational. And generally this is not a big deal, but in the early part of your settlement building, if you only got one of each plot type, it can be a big problem. It could shut down your food. And then in the mid to late game, it can be a problem because it can cut off your caravan services if it happens to be that worker that gets exceptionally sick. And then that can cause a whole bunch of other settlements that were depending on that one to fail. And so now incapacitation is disabled by default for anybody not playing on hardcore. One other thing to mention about these changes I'm talking about, these will not impact existing saves unless you run the options wizard again. So if you want to have these changes I'm describing, go into your city manager holotape, go to the tools and rerun the options wizard, and then select the appropriate one. So you would want automated for easy mode, city builder for the default set of options in SS2, and then hardcore if you want all of the bells and whistles turned on. So basically, with incapacitation disabled by default for what I would guess is going to be most players, you will find that the disease system is basically just kind of like a minor little. It's a minor inconvenience for your settlers, but it won't ever set you on shut you down effectively. One of the things that we plan on doing is smoothing out that curve a little bit more in the future. But again, this is a kind of a Band-Aid patch because it's going to be a while before we get to smooth out some of the older content, because it's going to require us changing quests and things. So we're focused on things we can do relatively simply without having to redo quest stuff, because we don't want to introduce a bunch of quest bugs right before we launch Chapter 3. All right, so now let's talk HQ settings. So overall, our goal with HQ is to make it so that for people who are on automated, you don't have to worry about any of the mechanics in HQ. You effectively just clean up and build whatever you want. All you have to do is just keep sending more people to HQ, and you'll get there eventually. For hardcore players, we basically left everything as is. We kind of realized that HQ, the way its mechanics were originally designed, is pretty hardcore in itself. It's got a lot of depth in the simulation and a lot of things you gotta worry about, and that matches perfectly with hardcore. So the automated, you can expect to actually feel like it's automated, just like the plot default settings. So City Builder is where we kind of tinkered a little bit. So the big things that we addressed in this are going to be the supply agreement system and the daily spending limits. Those are the two new systems that I think get a lot of folks hung up in HQ. I think the idea of the more people you have in a department, the more energy you have is pretty straightforward. I think building is pretty straightforward. So those two systems are the ones where we addressed our attention to. And what we've we've done is made it so that the daily spending for HQ is only limited now for those two, for hardcore and for a city builder profile, which are those who are playing not on easy mode and not on survival, somewhere in the middle. That when you're playing on city builder difficulty, you only have to worry about the limits that are imposed by building different room types. So that would be like building the power distribution room and upgrading it, or by just having a bunch of supply agreements. But you don't have to worry about the number of workers anymore. And as long as your settlement has your settlements have resources available, you will have access to them in HQ. It doesn't matter which settlement they're part of. So those are the big changes. So basically, we wanted to have you focus on just get a lot of people to HQ and then build things. And then that should take care of most of the HQ mechanics for you. You don't have to get in deep worrying about the particulars of it. And if you want to change things to make them even easier, basically you go into the HQ section and just turn everything off. So if there's anything still on there that you feel like is slowing things down, that's where you would change it. But those are the big changes that we made in our new settings. We did add one additional setting. So for those of you guys who like to tinker with the settings, or you want to try and find a non-standard profile to play with, we added a new setting in HQ called Resource Access Requires Supply Agreements. And basically, if this is off, you don't need to worry about supply agreements at all. You just immediately get access to all of the resources that your settlement network has. So this could be useful if you just don't want to have to do supply agreements whatsoever. You could turn off all the daily spending and turn off this, and that's what automated will be, and it would effectively make it so that supply agreements are just not needed at all anymore. All right, so we're in game now, and what I'm going to show you guys is the way that multi-person assignment works on plots that you've already filled up. So there was a little pop-up that you may have received in the past, and I know a lot of folks were unclear how it worked, and that was because prior to this patch, it wasn't working correctly at all. So I'm going to show you that now. So I've got a level 3 training plot here that has 3 assignments to it. As you can see, we've got 1, 2, and 3, and we've got a 4th person set up here for demonstration purposes. And yes, this is the same demo I did during my live stream bug fixing. So if you've already seen that, you're about to see that same thing. So if I take this 4th person and assign them here, I'm going to get this little pop-up. Now, previously, this way here would work. Yes, make them the owner, and that would basically make that person the primary owner of the plot. But what wasn't working before was if you chose yes, make them an occupant. So I'm going to do this now, and what's going to happen here is that the last person that had been assigned to this plot will now be unassigned, and this person is going to be assigned as the 2nd owner. So effectively, for each person, there's kind of a little secret number in the background. The primary owner is kind of always there, and then each of the people after that are considered secondary owners. So he is now made the secondary owner. And it looks like Cersei was the last one, so she got the bump. So now if we take Cersei and reassign her to it, and then we make them an occupant, well, now the guy that we just assigned before, he becomes the 3rd occupant, Cersei becomes the 2nd, and whoever was the 3rd before gets bumped off, so it looks like that was Pete. Now, the reason that this works this way is that we can kind of create a rotation now. So now if we assign Pete, we know it's going to bump off this settler, because when Cersei was assigned, she became number 2 and he became number 3. So by doing this, you can fully control who gets assigned to these multi-person without having to explicitly unassign. You can just keep assigning new people and it will push them down the line. Previously, that didn't do anything, and so it felt like the only way you could really change assignments was to unassign people from things by assigning them to something new. And now we have this kind of rotation system, so it'll just kind of push people down the line, pushing off the last one in a cycle. So now Pete will replace our first settler, and if we assign him again, it would start the cycle over again, unassigning Cersei, etc. So that is how that little menu works there. And just for clarification on the first one, this setting, I'll do this other one, always worked. If we do the yes, make them the owner, that is going to kick out this person who was clearly the primary owner, since they had never got kicked out when we were doing that little assignment rotation. And so now you can see she is not assigned to there. So primary, there's always one person that's the primary owner. That would be if the, like say for example, the plot got set back to level 1 somehow. If you change the building plan, the primary owner is who would remain as the owner of the plot until it built up and had support from more people. So hopefully that all makes sense. That system was not working. That is why that menu was very confusing, because it wasn't doing anything prior unless you selected the second option. So now the third option works as well. All right, guys, if you made it through this much of the patch notes video, then you know what it's about time for, and that is the time when I give away some merch. So I'm going to give you guys a hashtag. Once you hear that hashtag, you can leave a comment below with it if you want to get access to some Sim Settlements 2 merch. I'll read through all the comments, find everybody who left this hashtag, and pick one of you guys to get some merch. And please, as always, leave more than just the hashtag. Basically, if somebody just leaves just the hashtag, I ignore them, because I'm looking for stuff interesting to read. So you can leave me a bug report, leave me a funny story, tell me something you love about the mod, something you hate about it, whatever, just something interesting to read when I get that hashtag. So your hashtag for today for the merch poll is hashtag Band-Aid, because this is, a lot of this patch is kind of a Band-Aid to a larger problem that we need to address one day, and I promise we will do so. That is why it's a Band-Aid. All right, guys, as always, be sure to read the full patch notes. There's tons of details about these changes and a lot more things that we didn't talk about explicitly. All right, guys, take care and enjoy the mods.